Well, listen, it's great to have the both of you here to talk about thermal beats. And as Larry just kind of said before I started yakking here, um, I met, well, I'd met Larry before, but I met Kevin and Larry a year and a half ago in Harlem at the Harlem Record Festival. Wait, I'm saying it wrong. The Harlem Record, and well, first of
Oh,
all, is it making vinyl was number one.
right.
And Harlem Vinyl Festival, I think.
Harlem Vinyl Festival.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, tell me how did we get to Iceland and vinyl? I guess it started there at that very
Well,
meeting then.
actually, it even started just a little bit earlier because in October 2022, I was flying back from Amsterdam after making vinyl in Germany, and I had to go through Iceland. And I was knocked out by the entertainment. And at that October 22 event, it was the first time I heard something about a um, plant-based material. And Mark Carey was on the sustainability panel. So Mark and I met at that point. And I remember, I mean, even at that point, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to do something entrepreneurial with this.
Right.
It was just, it sounded like a really cool idea, was sort of a good solution to the product search that was going on, something different from the PVC process. And I mean, Kevin, were you in that at Offenbach at that one?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I don't think you and I really talked at that one about that at least,
Not about that. No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah. And so what happened was the following about 5, 6 months later, when we were at Minneapolis, I was moderating a session on the international pressing scene, and Gudmundur Isfeld from RPM Records in Copenhagen was on it. And right before we were about to start, I'm looking at his bio and it says he was born in Iceland.
Mm.
And I said to him, did you ever think about, uh, doing a factory in Iceland? And he said, I already, manufacture at least a third of the records that are being sold there. Um, and then we went into the session, so
Right.
then
It was
the
just like
funny thing is,
a tidbit.
right, but Kevin was, so then I found out we had to wait another 4 or 5 months. And in Harlem, where you were, um, I finally cornered Kevin and I said to him, what do you think about doing a factory in Iceland?
Which is an interesting place for me to interject because now my intro to this, folks that are listening to this chat will hear an introduction. I'll tell everybody who everybody is. But Kevin, now one of the things that you do is, from what I understand, and you can help me figure this out now, but you help people kind of figure out the logistics around putting together a vinyl pressing plant. Is that right? Why don't you tell us exactly what you do?
yeah, no, thanks, Evan. Yeah, so I'm an engineer by trade, and about 8 years ago, thereabouts, when I was seeing the sort of massive revival of vinyl. I mean, I'm someone who's always bought vinyl and completely obsessed by it and love records and music, but I was sort of tracking the sort of growth of the market, and I started to read about there being a bit of a kind of bottleneck as a result of there not being any new presses available. So people started buying records again, but there were no presses to build the capacity that was needed.
Right.
And long story short, I ended up reaching out to a Canadian company called Viral Technologies that had just started, and ended up kind of inviting myself over there and working with them on site, and they ended up saying, "Well, you be the European guy for us," and I ended up being the first working exclusively for Vol, installing and providing technical support to the Vol customers. And from then, because I was sort of a self-employed contractor, people started getting in touch with me and saying, "Oh, well, we're building a factory as well. Could you help us with that one?" And but it's a different press. It's a Phoenix Alpha. It's a new built or whatever it is. And I started to help with those, and ended up getting lots of experience with all of the other presses as well. And I still work with all those different presses and companies now. And I've just found myself in a fairly sort of unique position. Just, I didn't really have a plan, but it sort of worked out like this, that more and more people have started to develop their own factories in different parts of the world. And, I'm not on social media or anything. I'm just on LinkedIn, and people reached out and said, can you help me with this? And it's led me from installing and pressing records and teaching people how to use a press through to designing the infrastructure and looking at the sort of business aspects of it with certain companies. And it's because what we've seen, and you might know this yourself, is, scroll back 10 years and there was less than 40 or 50 record factories left in the whole world. I think it was as low as 35 at one point in the whole world. Fast forward this last 6, 7, 8 years, there's now around 200.
Yeah.
And nearly all of them are small to medium scale factories, 1 to 6 presses. They tend to specialize in independent music. They tend to have high frequency of jobs, but low volume, sort of 500 to 1,000 is very typical. But they also, the profile of those people behind those new companies, they tend to be, really highly committed, very passionate people that have a particular kind of passion for music. Maybe they've come from some other aspect of the music industry, maybe a label or some other, or maybe even an artist sometimes, not necessarily manufacturing, or don't necessarily come with technical engineering type background or skills. So I've ended up finding myself in a very lucky position of helping people to see how the cake is baked, and to hopefully develop efficient manufacturing systems, because I'm able to put into what I do my history of working in the renewable sector with companies like Tesla and the solar sector. And so infused in what I try to do, and this is where myself and Larry align and where we come together with Iceland, the Iceland project is try and inform both the manufacturing process itself with every aspect of sustainable best practices we can possibly muster, along with the product itself. Because we found, and where we align again, that a lot of the music industry is very much inclined towards trying to be more sustainable, but don't necessarily know, the sort of the detail of how we get there on the ground level, not just in terms of saying nice words about wouldn't it be great if we could reduce our carbon footprint, but how do we actually do that? And so that was the basis on which me and Larry kind of put our heads together and thought, what would be the gold standard and where can we put it? And Iceland is the answer.
Tell Evan what you told so I said to you, what do you think about doing a factory in Iceland? Do you remember exactly what you said?
Well, as it happened, I'd been to, actually, credit to Making Vinyl Conference, because the journey from the UK to the US, because I've been to a bunch of Making Vinyl Conferences now, it tends to, the cheaper flights tend to go via Iceland. So I just thought, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of stopping for 1 hour at Reykjavik and then bouncing on to the US, I'm going to go the day before. And I'd heard about these great record stores in Reykjavik. So I thought, if I take the same journey, the same way, but go the day before, I can have 24 hours in Reykjavik, raid all the record shops, do a spa at the pool, the famous thermal, and be on the plane the next day. And that's what I'd done, and found these amazing record stores. But also, I've been someone who's been loving Icelandic or artists from Iceland for a long time. And then when you're there, it feels like you go into pretty much any random bar and there's a band playing. And so Iceland is one of those countries that pound for pound kind of really punches above its weight in terms of its musical output compared to its tiny population. And, Larry's been a fan of a lot of the music there. So again, we vibed on that and we're like, this is a really unique place. And the icing on the cake is just how progressive the country is in wanting to actively get behind initiatives around sustainable businesses and manufacturing and efforts. So it's kind of like the perfect ground zero for trying to design and implement the most sustainable factory on the planet, if possible. And the reason it's possible is because actually half the work is done for us, because the whole country, 97% of all of the power used in Iceland comes from geothermal and hydroelectric sources. So it's all green energy. So even if you tried to create a carbon footprint, it's harder than most places when you're in Iceland because it's all set up for it. So we kind of got the conversion of a perfect set of circumstances, an incredible music ecosystem and activity, a very supportive set of partners in Iceland, both from a music and label perspective, but also from a government and business perspective. And we've also got the insights that we've gained over the last few years in terms of how to optimize the manufacturing process for quality, efficiency, and importantly, sustainability.
Just back to your comment about the music, I just wanted to say thanks also for the record. I believe this is the first record that you guys pressed at the new plant, and the music. I mean, we're really here to talk about the plant and pressing in Iceland and everything. But the music is so excellent, and of course, listeners should know there's definitely a Bjork vibe here. But there's a lot of voices and accents. So if you really love that stuff, but it's so much more. There's some great writing, great production, and it really comes through here. And Larry, isn't there a funny story about you kind of hearing you were on an Icelandic airline and you heard or how did that go? And you kind of learned
Well, I
about the
just wanted
music
to
there
actually,
too.
yeah, I wanted to point out that with Kevin, I wasn't as well versed in Icelandic music as he was. I basically knew the Sugar Cubes, Bjork, and
Right.
Sigur Rós. That was where it ended. But when I was on the flight, I was knocked out by the in-flight entertainment, and I was like, "There's 200 artists here, and I don't know any of them." And if any place in the world needs a record factory, it might be Iceland. But I do want to just, and Kevin can add to this, clarify one thing. So we didn't press that record that you have at our factory.
Oh, okay.
So Kevin, you want to talk a little bit about that? Just to...
Yeah, so the factory doesn't actually exist yet, just to be
Oh,
clear.
okay.
We're working on it as we speak, in the sense that we're pulling together the investment, the partners, and the location, the specific sort of factory space and everything. That's what we work out, and we're all being well as long as we bring together the partners and investors that we're working on right now, and it all comes together. We aim to be open by the end of 2025. But best case scenario, worst case, early 2026. Takes a little while to kind of get everything together. But what that record represents is the process we're going to demonstrate is possible. The use of fully sustainable materials, 100% organic, plant-based material instead of PVC, sustainable packaging. And there's even an extra digital element to it, which we're calling smart vinyl, which is kind of like an enhanced, like a download card on steroids, let's say. It's like a digital treasure chest with all sorts of free content, but it's interactive, meaning you can communicate with the label and the artist directly through it and have that two-way engagement. So it's about fan engagement. And really the reason we wanted to do a record as an example of what Thermal Beats represents is to show what is possible, that we can make records much more sustainable and we can engage the listener, the fan, the community at a much deeper level. So we can have and enjoy and love our records in the way that we already do, but we can have extra layer to that, and we can innovate. So what we're hoping to show with Thermal Beats in Iceland is just what is now possible in terms of trying to be the gold standard for both sustainable practices and in the record industry, but also innovation. There's a lot more we can do with a format that we love and will love forever, but it's been around for 70 years. We're certainly not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to make a better wheel.
Right. So this one that I have, this is that formula of what it is.
Yeah, it's the made from sugar beet.
So I could take a bite out of this right now and I'd be fine.
You could, and it won't kill you, and that's the point. I mean, with PVC, and look, I just want to say something about PVC. Look, you can see
when Larry saw me at the FMU record fair. Actually, I was munching on one of these in the corner, and the food was so expensive there that I just decided to start eating the Beats records.
Well, you know what? When it's fresh off the press, literally as you make the record, for about an hour or two, it before it totally cools down, it smells like burnt caramelized sugar. It smells like burnt candy.
Well, it's got a smell, doesn't it? It has a smell, doesn't it?
It just lingers there a little bit, right?
I think so. Am I crazy, Larry? Am I crazy here?
Actually, I have not smelled it, but I don't have one right here, but I trust you on this.
You know, Larry, as two academics here, we finally gotten to the place where we're smelling records on video.
And it's
This is the
okay.
height of vinyl and sound scholarship right here.
Right, right. So, but it is important to talk about one about the other founding partner, of the trio, and then we since have added a fourth, an Icelander, but Gummendor, who Kevin, you said you mean Gummy, said this. Now he's the co-owner of RPM Records in Copenhagen, and so he immediately, like he said to me, yeah, I've thought about doing a factory. So when we had that first Zoom meeting, the three of us, we realized we were all on the same wavelength on a lot of this. And so our records here on in, that one was pressed by Press on Vinyl in England. But the next one will be done in Copenhagen until we have the record
Yeah, when
factory
everything's up.
done. Right. Yeah. I just want
So,
to clarify.
where did the idea? So, tell me about a little bit about the history of the sugar beet as being this sort of PVC substitute. Where did this idea come from? I imagine it may have been used somewhere else in manufacturing before vinyl. And so, who was the person that said, "Hey, you know what we could use this for?"
Yeah, well, just a quick correction. It was actually that sampler, the Iceland Airways sampler, was pressed at Vinyl Presents in the UK.
Oh,
Just,
thanks for pointing that out. Yeah.
yeah, no worries at all. But in terms of how we came to Sugar Beet for this, the company Evolution Music in the UK was founded by three guys, Adrian, Steve, and Mark. Mark Carey, we've mentioned the CEO a few years ago, probably 5, 6 years ago, something like that. And it's taken them a few years of research to get to the point where we have a viable feedstock in terms of the raw material. And they've tried, I mean, I've been the technical director for a couple of years now. They invited me to join as a technical sort of guy a couple of years ago. But they were working on this before I got there, and they had tried all sorts of different materials. So there wasn't really something they could refer to as a sort of ground zero that they took the idea involved. It literally evolved it from nothing to base it on. So we tried things like hemp, we tried fungi,
Hmm.
types of fungi, and different sort of organic materials. And the only one that, well, hemp sort of worked a little bit, but it's a bit too fibrous. And fungi was hilarious. It just sort of disintegrated and didn't really
Mm,
work, to try and make it into a polymer first before you
sure.
compound. But sugar beet was really, really robust and worked kind of mechanically speaking. It worked out of the gates. Now, what we've been doing since we first figured out it worked, and I came in, I sort of entered the stage at that point when they first got it to work mechanically, has really been improving its mechanical qualities whilst also improving its sound. And we've still got some work to do. It's not quite there yet, and we're still saying it's proof of concept. But as you know yourself, because you've got a copy, if no one told you it was made from something different, you wouldn't necessarily know. Now there is a noise floor that's higher than PVC a little bit, so if you turn it up high, you'll notice maybe, but in the quiet moments, but not so much that it would disturb the music. So we're already at a point where we've proven its viability as an potential alternative to PVC, but we're working to make sure that it's not only as good as, but better ultimately, both in terms of quality of sound, but also in terms of cost. Because the other thing about sugar beet is it's actually quite a cheap material to produce, and pound for pound, much cheaper to produce and make into records than oil-derived PVC.
Mm,
It's also fully non-toxic.
right.
So one of the ideas we're keen to sort of use Iceland as ground zero for is to develop this idea of farm to factory to fan. So what happens with PVC right now is it gets, it creates a carbon footprint in multiple ways. So first you start with oil. So that comes from, let's
Yeah.
say, the Middle East. Then it's shipped to another part of the world to be processed into a basic resin. Then that resin is shipped somewhere else to be processed into a final compound. Then it's shipped to the factory wherever in the world to be made into a record. So there's two, three, or sometimes four shippings that happen of the various stages of the material. And that's, of course, creating a compound before it's even made into a record.
Right.
What can be different about utilizing something that any continent can grow, and that's an important point to make. One of the things about sugar beet is it's very, very hardy and can grow in any environment, meaning hot climates, cold climates, and everything in between, which means and the processing from taking it out of the earth to its initial resin stage and then onto the final compound there's of course work to do, but it's much more simpler than it is to take oil and do the same process. So what that means is you can microsize the production from farm to factory, which means that you can end up in a scenario where you could actually have those production facilities linking agriculture to manufacturing in each landmass.
Right.
Why do we want to do that? It's because we want to have our cake and eat it. We want to make a product that's more sustainable by its very nature in terms of its material. But we also would like to cut out this phenomenon of globally shipping things, creating a carbon footprint around the world. Wouldn't it be better to set up local production in each landmass, have it made in that landmass, shipped across the ground to the factory, and made and distributed in that landmass? That would be the holy grail. And we have that opportunity to develop that working model of farm to factory to fan in Iceland, which is another beautiful thing about the country and how open they've been to kind of working with us.
And I imagine that would also keep the cost down of the product. May make it might make it more attractive than your regular PVC product. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to hate on PVC because, as you can see, I've got a wall of records. Not quite as impressive.
I've got some too. I got a couple too.
But because there is an argument, I think a legitimate argument, to say that your traditional PVC record, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And how many records, honestly, end up in the landfill? They don't really. They tend to be regifted and sold and passed on and inherited. So, can qualify it, but it's not so much the end product ending in the ground, which PVC, by the way, is toxic to the earth in a way that sugar beets and this plant alternative is not toxic to the earth. So if you did eat it, you're not going to get ill, you'll survive. But it's also the manufacturing process to get to a record is quite destructive in that sense. So we do think we have an alternative, but of course, this is the high risk bit. The high risk bit is if we don't get to that holy grail of equal to or better than PVC in terms of sound quality, then we almost have nothing. It will be an interesting novelty and footnote of history that we had a go and we didn't quite get there. In terms of cost, though, ultimately, right now it's more expensive than PVC to make records because we're making it in the laboratory. As soon as we can get to a point where we can justify going to a production line, the economies of scale that we can enjoy will bring us price parity with PVC in the first year or two, and then ultimately it'll be cheaper because as a feedstock, as a raw material. As I say, sugar beets is much more cost effective than oil derived anything, including PVC. So, that's really a sort of scaling issue. Our job is to kind of grow the demand for records made from this material to the point we can start to enjoy those economies of scale.
I just want to ask,
sorry, what were you going to say, Larry?
Yeah, on terms of the sound, an Abbey Road in-house producer named Rob Cass was speechless to find out that the test record he heard was made entirely from plants. Was speechless that it was not a PVC record. And he played it for Peter Thomas, who makes the monitors for recording studios. And he said it was also indistinguishable from traditional vinyl and felt so strongly about it that he invested in Evolution Music. So, I mean, they've already achieved a pretty high level of audio fidelity, but, Kevin knows better that it can be even improved further. The other thing about this project that is, I find, where the potential is, the it'll be like artist driven, So for example, Billie Eilish has made a big priority of of her last record being as green as she thought it could be. And we're hoping that she'll consider thermal beats next time around.
Right.
And the same thing true with the Coldplay record that came out a few months ago. It's certainly a good thing that they recycled these plastic bottles that were discarded into a river in South America. But on the other hand, it still came from a fossil fuel originally.
Is that what they're doing, Larry? Because I know I just got a record, in fact, this week that they were calling it Eco Mix. Now, I don't, I imagine that a lot of the different recycled things probably are recycled from different things, but typically, and for our audience here, people should know it's common practice in a record pressing plant to say, take some of the vinyl that was discarded for some reason and then they reuse it. And in fact, it's often said that the best sounding mix of vinyl is often a mix of virgin PVC and recycled PVC together. Kind of gets you a special, particularly good mix. But what you mentioned is plastic bottles with Coldplay. What else do you know now you're doing something totally, we're talking about using organic matter, which I suppose you could argue oil is organic, but that's for another show. But you're talking about using a vegetative matter here to create a record. But what other things are people kind of experimenting that you've heard of as far as making vinyl greener?
Well, I mean, there's already a product on the market called BioVinyl that it's a mixture. And any discussion about this type of thing sort of veers into the territory of potentially greenwashing. That there are claims made that have not really been substantiated fully. I mean, we are very mindful of that, and once we start, doing our marketing, we're not going to, say it's. We're going to stick to the science essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin can really, speak better to that.
Yeah, Kevin's got something on that, I think.
But the other thing about that is the Vinyl Record Manufacturers Association put out an excellent report. Well, they put out two reports. One about the carbon footprint of a vinyl record, and to what Kevin was talking about before about the circular economy. If we eliminate the shipping, so for example, that last batch of A Taste of Iceland records was shipped by air to Iceland. That's a substantial lowering of the carbon footprint. But as far as once we can get certified, we'll be able to show that because the record is made of a plant-based material, the carbon footprint is not being left by that physical object. Unlike even BioVinyl, because we know that some portion of it did come from recycled cooking oil.
So they smell like, so instead of smelling like beets, they smell like old French fries.
Something like that.
Kevin, what were you going to say there, Kevin?
Yeah, so the term biovinyl that seems to have sort of permeated the industry in the last couple of years is, I get that it's kind of shorthand, to indicate that this is, better than traditional PVC in terms of its carbon impact. But in some ways, it's arguably more unhelpful than it's helpful, because right now, biovinyl it's become almost a meaningless term in that it can include everything from just recycled PVC to records made from vegetable oil, of which you don't necessarily know the proportionate mix, what other ingredients got in it, and what is the provenance of that oil. And obviously, if it's recycled oil, it infers that oil has been process once and then again. So that's kind of like two processes, two carbon footprints, and everything in between. So there's a sort of range of things that biovinyl could apply itself to. Even there's been records made from recycled plastic bottles from the sea, for example. They don't sound great, but it is possible to take different sources of plastic and recycle it into something that you can then term as better than virgin PVC in terms of if you look at it from a certain angle. But as Larry mentioned, one of the challenges here is it's very difficult, in fact, to really be exact about some of the provenance of these materials and to capture precisely what the carbon footprint is. Whereas the very cleanest way of doing it, and forgive me for sort of suggesting this about the evolution plant material here, but the advantage is you can identify every single stage of the process, and you can calculate, which is what we're in the middle of doing, calculate the impact of each of the processes. So if you have a material that's essentially a combination of different kind of bit of vegetable oil, well, what vegetable? There's a difference. And let
Right.
me explain one difference. Palm oil, for example, is a vegetable oil, but it's not particularly great because it consumes so much water and it comes from different parts of the world that it's, negative to the earth, and it's kind of consuming a lot of water, and it's traveling halfway around the world to be processed into something. Whereas one of the other benefits we found with this polymer made from sugar beets, the nature of sugar beets is it's net positive to the earth. We didn't know this when we started. We've since come to understand the material itself is really good. It's very low water usage, high density, meaning you can get a lot of crop in a lot, not as much space.
Mm.
And it's net neutral to the ground, meaning traditionally with agriculture, you might have a crop that has 3 seasons of growing, and then the fourth season you leave fallow for the earth to recover its nutrients, or you put a completely different crop in there to sort of effectively add that nutrients back in. So there's kind of inefficiency there. But with sugar beets, you can grow it for more than 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons continuously, or you can take it out and immediately put another crop in there. So there's some
They're
benefits to it
resilient.
that we weren't
Are
expecting.
these records compostable? Can you compost them?
Yeah, so you can fully recycle them, and in the same way that it's common practice in the industry to regrind old records, PVC records, the waste from the process, and then make new records again. You can do exactly the same with the plant-based sugar beet material as well.
But I mean, if you stuck it in the dirt for a year, what would happen to it?
Well, the first thing to say is if you stuck it in the earth, it's not going to be toxic to the earth. That's very important.
Right.
For it to eventually decompose and be recycled back into the earth itself, if you left it as a full record, it would take a very, very long time, like more than our lifetime. So you'd be smarter to grind it up first, and then it will dissolve. So what that means, but the upside of that is in the testing that we've done, and just to be clear, we've put this material through exactly the same test as PVC is in terms of things like hardness, rigidity, flexibility, wear in terms of playback wear, things like that, heat resistance, all the rest of it. It scores exactly the same, and in some cases, some of the tests are a tiny bit better than PVC. So, of course, we can't wait 40 years and see if the records still work. But in
Right.
terms of the testing, the hardness testing, the sort of longevity testing that are possible in the lab, it performs just as good, if not better, than PVC. So we know that if you store it on your shelf like any old any record, it's going to last exactly the same way. But if it did end up in the ground, we're not doing any harm to the earth, which is again a bonus.
And,
Interesting.
and the thinking about records has changed even over the past 5 years. So for example, Evan, I guess you consider yourself a little bit of an audiophile, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
I'd have to
So
say that.
5, 6 years ago, 180 gram was such a big deal,
Right.
right? And the thinking was, well, the weight adds to the quality, which not necessarily in terms of the sound. I mean, imperfection could happen all throughout that whole process of
Sure.
making.
I totally agree.
vinyl record. So in the sense of sustainability, use less material, which is good for the food chain. Um, it's less of a big deal. The other thing I was going to point out is a government at RPM, and I bought this record actually in London at Rough Trade in August 2022. They had the soundtrack album of Greta Thunberg's documentary.
Oh, interesting.
Who pretty much the face of climate change
Right.
activism, right? And I bought the record and I was like amazed, and everything about the packaging was um, green, and like recycled paper, recycled inks, and plant-based inks, and the record itself at that time was recycled PVC. You know, um, so I mean, one of our plans is actually to get in touch with Greta Thunberg and see if we could press a record, on the plant-based Evo material, and really walk the talk here, like with a record.
Yeah. Well, and back to your 180 gram comments, the other thing about, well, and I have some really, I just made a post last week. I was listening to a Dynaflex in the 70s, and a way to save some money and PVC in the 70s. The RCA company famously created Dynaflex, was an extremely thin vinyl, and if you do this, it will go whoa, 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 whoa. And some of them sound really good. A lot of Bowie's records were on
Yeah,
Dynaflex.
think of Young Americans immediately.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was enjoying a Jerry Reed record last week, and it was on Dynaflex, and it sounded great. So thickness doesn't necessarily equate with better audio quality all the time.
I completely agree with that. I mean, because I'm involved day to day in actually pressing records in different factories, and I've gotten to understand, what are the big factors in the outcome, the actual quality of the record. And for me, excuse me, I know there'll be people out there that swear by 180, even 200 gram records, but actually, the path to ultimate quality, starts with the recording itself, of course, the quality of that recording, and the mastering is hugely important. But then where it can all go horribly wrong or fantastically right is in the cut to lacquer. The pitch control and really the depth, width, and spacing of the grooves is kind of really fundamental to that quality of sound and the sort of the loudness of the record, which to the layperson listening will really have an impact in the resultant quality, or at least the perception of that. So it's really the chain of events that start well before the pressing, and certainly are as, if not, I would say, more important than the weight of the record itself. You can have a terrible sounding 200 gram record and an amazing sounding 120 gram record and everything in between. It really is about the cut. I think is super important. The galvanics process, of course, and it all starts with a mastering. And I suspect your Jimmy Reed record is because it was recorded fantastically
Right.
and cut beautifully. That's why those Blue Note records will still be pressed in 100 years' time easily, because the quality and the sound staging of the original recording and the mastering was just exceptional. Everything is so well spaced out in the music that you have to, I mean, it's possible, but you have to try extra hard to mess it up when you press it.
And don't
Yeah.
forget, with 180 gram or 200 grams, sometimes depending on your turntable, you might have to even adjust your VTA there. And a lot of folks probably don't know what I'm talking about, and that's okay. But if you're serious about your vinyl playback, and you want to, people buy a product like that expecting it to be superior because that's the marketing behind it. But they may not, their turntable may need a slight adjustment to really accept some of those thicker things. You know what I'd really love to hear about from both of you? Tell me the other innovation here that's really interesting is this the scanning. Tell me about the what was it, microchip? What are we talking about? Are we implanting microchips here, you guys?
Oh, the smart vinyl.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, So all that is really is, and we're starting to see more companies provide these services, thinking about how to integrate digital music assets and digital music with physical music media. And I've sort of been researching this for a while, and I connected with a company that could build these sort of platforms. But essentially, what it is the starting point. I think so. I'm not a programmer, a developer, anything of that nature. So I have to think about it purely as a fan of records. What do I want? Okay, so if I have a choice between a record that's just the standard record, great. I love that. You can play the record, and I'm happy. But if I can have the same record for not much more in cost, like a special edition version of that record, and I get all of these like DVD extras, and it's like a couple of bucks more, I'll probably go for that. I don't
Right.
need to know the sort of cleverness of the what's behind it in terms of the coding and the rest of it. So on these simplest terms, we've been used to kind of download cards for a bunch of years now.
Right.
You can
Right.
download the high res version of the record if you want. Truth be told, probably not that many people do that. They might get the download card, maybe 20% actually use the content. So what more can you do? Well, now with the blockchain, it's possible to do a bunch of things. So one, you can have that set up where you can, if you want, keep it simple, have all the digital tracks embedded into the record. And you go online, you put in your code that's given with the record, a bit like an individual number, special edition 1 to 1,000. You have a code, you type it into the server, and it opens up your digital treasure chest of all of these free digital goodies. It could be stems to remix the track, could be the
Mm.
original track, high res versions, could be video content, could be exclusive copy demos, whatever you want. So it's like taking the download concept to the next level, not just one time, one off download, but an interactive digital treasure chest that you can keep going back in. The label can go back in and offer new things in the future, put and notify the customer, because that's automatically happens when you register it. Meaning, like, you can buy your record, maybe there's some stuff in your little digital treasure chest already. Maybe 6 months later, the artist is on tour and they're saying, here's a promotional offer through
Mm.
the digital treasure chest, that fan engagement aspect to that digital platform that's created. So you can do a lot more these days, and the blockchain enables you to authenticate and prove the ownership, which means you can actually say, this is, differentiate this copy from any other copy. This is an original product. It's pressed here. Here's the metadata for it. So it's a gift for those who care about those things, the authentication of the record and the precise pressing. But it also allows you to engage with it where you don't have to be a computer science graduate. You can just say, oh, I've got all these extra stuff. And by the way, I'm now getting advance notice from the label artists about different promotions they're running, and I can continue my engagement with it. So how it actually gets embedded into the record is basically, there's two ways. It's not that clever, really. You can have what's called a NFC chip. Looks like a little button that's pressed into the record.
Mhm.
So there's a bit of a technique of pressing it into the record.
Does this
Uh,
record have that?
Oh no! So
No.
we kept it simple on this one and just had a QR code on the back. It
Right.
serves the same purpose. So on the insert, there's a QR code, and the point of an NFC chip, if you want a physical chip embedded, or the NFC code, all it does is
There's your
route you.
QR code. There it is. Oh, it is not.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just one of these
So,
guys. Yeah.
and just below it, there was an individual number. The really key thing is whether it's an NFC chip embedded in the record, or a QR code or barcode or anything else printed on the insert inside or on the back of the record, is that you need the key, the sort of, which is all it is a list of numbers and letters. That is the individual key that the only one in the world has that one key. And that is literally the key to your digital treasure chest. So the QR code or the NFC chip just routes you to a server, and then you can download the code, and enjoy and interact with all of the digital goodies inside that chest. And the cool thing about it is not server dependent. So it might start on one server, but if that company goes down, it exists, that data exists forever on the blockchain. So it's bulletproof in that sense. The other thing that it does automatically is it creates what's called an NFT. Now, I deliberately left that to the last to mention the phrase, the word NFT, because the association in most of the public's mind of what an NFT is, if anyone's heard of it at all, is those stupid monkey pictures from about 2 or 3 years ago, right?
All right.
The NFT and NFT can be much, much more, but essentially at its simplest, it's just it's an asset that exists in digital form only. It can be a picture, can be an animation, can be a film, can be a piece of music, doesn't matter. You can create an NFT, which is a unique digital asset that you and you alone then own. And if you want, you can trade it. And now, for some people, no, they don't care. I don't particularly care for it myself. I just want all the digital goodies. But what we're saying is with a smart vinyl record, we can now add a layer to it that wasn't there before that allows you to enjoy your record in all sorts of new and different ways and ongoing ways. It creates a digital link between you and the artist creator label. And it's a two-way street, meaning the artist or label has access to that digital treasure chest and that platform, so they can reach out to you, they can offer you goodies, put more stuff in, and so can the owner. They can communicate with the label and artist if they want to through that, or they don't have to do any of that. They
Right.
still got a beautiful record that they can play in this normal way. It doesn't affect the record at all, but it just adds a layer. And in our way of thinking, we already have special editions. So we have let's say a normal stand black vinyl record. You might have a color variant, a special edition. It might be 2 or 3 bucks more. But for the same money, if you want, you can have the standard variant, but you can also add into it and fold into it all these other ways to kind of enjoy the artist, enjoy the music.
Mm.
So that's all it is. It's kind of like a download card on steroids, but it's offering more value and more enjoyment to the product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Really
Sort of
interesting.
reminds me of in the late 90s, remember there was that whole movement to CD-ROMs and DVD-ROMs. So
Yeah.
you have physical media, but it's still a digital technology. But then there was also a capability because it was attached. If you played the ROM in a computer, then you would be able to unlock, as Kevin was saying, all these special goodies. But you could also, send an email or buy more stuff through e-commerce. And it's like bridging the analog and the digital worlds.
Yeah,
I
I
tell
do.
you
I
one other
remember
thing.
those CDs. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, apologies for sort of over talking, but there's one other very interesting thing from a sort of um, maybe a music business aspect to what is now possible through smart records, blockchain technology, which is the monetization of it both for the fan and for the artist. So what you can do is set this up so that if it's resold, then the artist label can even extract a kind of fee from that if they wish. If they've added so much value, extra value to that digital content, and maybe they've created some unique and exclusive content for that record, then it's like a repeat fee. If you don't have to set it up like this, but you can. This is now possible. You can set it up in a way that that artist forever will get a small percentage of any resale because of that unique digital asset that they created and put into that record. Same for the fan, because it has a standalone NFT as part of the kind of all of the digital goodies that you get. That they can sell that together with the record, or also separately. So it kind of encourages that way of kind of really rewarding both sides without a middleman taking a cut. So
Right.
there's no involved. There's no record labels, corporate labels getting involved to take their piece. It can be set up to go directly to the artist.
Yeah, the labels will figure that out. They'll they'll know.
Absolutely.
But
And good on them as well.
it's
But
like an app. It's like if you have an app that you downloaded for free, but yet if you want additional functionality from that app, you would then begin to either pay a flat rate or some monthly fee or something like that. But you could use it uh, free first. But as I said, if
yeah,
there was something else you wanted to do, so the artist could offer something else too. If you want to, it's like an upsell.
Yeah, it's completely free if you want to set up like that, and that's up to the artist or label. I mean, with the Iceland Airways sampler, we had nine new artists from Iceland on it, and each of them submitted different things. So one artist submitted like exclusive videos and content, another like had demo tracks and. Was it demo tracks or the just the high res digital tracks? Another submitted stems, but what's cool is because we made a pre-agreement with the organisers of Iceland Airwaves that we knew that they were going to film a bunch of these exclusive contents through the festival and do interviews and also. So we said to them, look, if after the festival is finished, a few weeks after, can we come back to you and can you give us some of that exclusive content? Some of the concert footage and some of the interviews that you've done, and we'll throw that back into that digital treasure chest. And so the people that ended up with those records will then get notified and say, there's some new content
Something
just for
else
you.
is there. Yeah, something
We
else
can
has
do
been
that
added.
after the fact. And that's the cool thing.
All right. Larry, tell me a little bit about now. It's not open yet, but you do have an actual structure. There's a building, right? That you sort of.
Right. Well, yeah, I wanted just to back up a little bit about. So in January of last year, Kevin and Gummy and I decided we were going to take a trip to Iceland, the three of us. And the first business meeting we had was with something called the Eco Business Park, Iceland Eco Business Park. And in 2008, when the economy collapsed very suddenly, one of the casualties of the economic collapse was an aluminum smelter who there was already Alcoa, which was a very controversial business operating, an American company operating in Iceland.
Hmm.
And the environmentalists were really angry about it. And in fact, Bjork herself was at the site protesting. Around the same time, she and Sigur Rós did a concert that was televised on national television in Iceland, a concert in support of the environmentalists. So it turned out um, about 15 years ago, the government ended up buying this half completed cement building that is the length of two football fields.
It's big.
And there were two individuals who were basically charged with turn this into an eco-friendly operation. So one of them came from the fishing industry, which is the biggest export in Iceland. The other came from the airline industry. Um, so they were saying, well, we know we could get those types of businesses involved, but we're known for culture and, in the arts. Then we need something like that. So then somebody said, well, Gumby's sister-in-law worked for a business development organization in Iceland, and she connected us with. They found out about us through his sister-in-law, and I mean, Kevin, you probably agree with me. It was like the greatest moment to see that there was a stereo set up in a conference room that probably never had the stereo before, but to impress us that we think what you're doing is a really great idea.
I,
So
th I think that's interesting to kind of place what we're doing in a wider context as well. I mean, this might sound like lofty ambitions, but genuinely, we're coming from a place of love of records. The one thing we all have in common is we absolutely love records as a format and love music, but also kind of thinking, how can we doing what we're trying to do have maybe positive repercussions for other industries, for other communities,
Mm.
I mean, essentially, we're making something out of plastic. We started with making records because we love records, but the implications of what we're doing with the material itself grow beyond that. The biggest consumer of PVC in the world is construction materials, and then the second one after that is cabling. Believe it or not, soft PVC for cabling. So we're already working on formulas for tweaking the formula for use in construction materials, and that, which is I mean, those absolutely dwarf the record industry in terms of record
Sure.
manufacturing. And same for the process itself. How can we demonstrate what's possible with manufacturing in terms of optimizing? But all that aside, bottom line is, we just feel incredibly lucky that we get to make records, and whether it's made from plants or it's got a smart vinyl element to it. In some ways, it might sound crazy that I'm saying this, but in some ways, none of that matters as long as I get to make a great record and I can listen to it and enjoy it. Everything else is a huge bonus. But what I'm saying, I'd ask you this, Evan, if I haven't a chance to ask you any questions, but I want to ask you one,
Uh-oh.
which is kind of your perspective on I guess the market, and maybe in terms of artists and labels, because it's one thing us wanting to do it because we're sort of true believers, I guess, and I come from myself a renewable background, and Larry is an encyclopedia of records and a love of the culture. But there's no point us doing this if kind of no one wants it, and it's important to know that there is a market for what we're trying to do. But the confidence I take is when you read about, hear, or speak to artists and labels, the great thing about music and the music industry in terms of those involved in it is there's a much more a bigger predisposition towards supporting sustainability, supporting progressive ways and of innovating what we all love. So I would ask you, I'd throw this to you as a kind of uber consumer of records, if you like. What kind of gets you out of bed other than the music itself? What are the factors that kind of get you interested or you care about as a consumer of records?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that I appreciate a well-made package, and I think there's a lot of talk about cost as far as vinyl records are concerned nowadays, which some of it is probably a little, blown out of proportion. But I think you just want I think you want to see value. You feel like you want to pay for something and then get something that's really good in return. There's nothing worse than maybe obviously I buy a lot of used records too, which I think is its own sustainable way of getting into records. But there's nothing worse than buying a maybe a new record, and particularly at a place that you can't return it. If you're buying something online and you get it and it's in rough shape when you open it up, you have some ability to return it somehow. But let's say you're at a show and you buy, the artist has some records for sale and you bring it home and there's a defect or it's just a really lousy sounding pressing. That's a really unfortunate situation for me, because you just don't have an opportunity to really recoup your the money that you put into it. But I think for me as a consumer, I look for a value, and even if I'm spending money on something, I want it to be what it purports to be. So back to what you guys are doing, I think, the sound quality is really important. I think that'll be important to people, but I think both consumers and artists, as Larry pointed out, are definitely going to have a feeling of wanting a product that has a sustainable component to it. And I think that for those consumers, that's certainly going to be an important selling point.
Well, there are two research studies from 2024 that show, especially Gen Z, care about sustainability and willing to pay more for a record in particular. So Key Production in England did a research study of that, found 71% of Gen Z was willing to pay. And the other demographics actually were healthy percentages, like going to like even my baby boomer group, a little under 50%.
You're not a
Uh,
baby boomer. Come on. You're an X. You're an X,
oh,
Generation X,
well, I'm a
Larry.
young baby boomer, but but and on the pack, that was true on the packaging side too. I think you're absolutely right. The packaging is very, very important. So I mean that's really good, to know. And you also, we have to look at the Gen Z type artists like a Billie Eilish
Mhm.
who care about this stuff. And it's not only her, Phoebe Bridgers. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty
Sure.
of, especially on the indie side of the music business. Um, I mean, the other thing so the second meeting we had, by the way, was with Siggy, the drummer of the Sugar Cubes. He's a senior advisor of Iceland Music. He immediately fell in love with the whole concept. And he said to me, I'm going to be in New York next month. You want to get together? So I said, yeah. So at that point, I really boned up on the whole Sugar Cubes catalog.
Right.
And on their second album, there's a song called Dear Plastic, and it's Bjork complaining about all kinds of plastic. She doesn't name PVC yet.
Right.
That was from 1989. So anyway, I said to Siggy, I want this to be one of our first records. And he said, that is a brilliant idea. I will bring it up with my former bandmates. So then in early October, I went back to Iceland. This was like, basically setting up the launch of the record that Kevin and Gummy oversaw at Airwaves. And Siggy came back to me. He said, all right, this is what Bjork wants to do. She wants to get a remix done of the song. And then on the flip side, they'll figure out a live track, something unreleased,
Hmm.
which from our perspective is great because it creates an entirely new product, both sides.
Right.
So that's something we have to look forward to pressing this year.
Oh, it's so cool. Guys, I really thank you for taking time to talk about this with me. And I think for listeners, it's also a deep dive just into the direction of sustainability in vinyl and where it's going. And this is, as I said, using an actual vegetative material to create these discs and have them sound good is really a pretty fascinating thing. So thanks for sharing the process with me, and I wish you the best of luck. And I got to get over there. I got to get to Iceland and see this thing when it is up and running.
No,
We'd
we'd
love
love
to
that.
have you.
Yeah, we have to
Thanks.
have a launch party.
100%.
Definitely.
You'll be top of the guest list, Evan. And thanks very much for your show and what you do and your support. And good luck, man.
Thank you very much. And Larry, do we have any last minute breaking making vinyl news? Do we know can
When
you
when is this
announce
going
where
to?
the
When is
next
this going to?
US, actually it'll probably be next week, so it won't be it'll be too
No, no,
pretty soon.
actually, that will work better. I would say there's a little bit of an embargo, but for the first time, you're uh, the first outsider who knows this.
This is the scoop.
Right. So the 2025 Making Vinyl event will take place in Memphis. I spoke with
Memphis,
Brian.
Tennessee.
Yeah, I spoke with Brian Ekitz this morning. He confirmed that he has a contract with the Memphis Convention Center. And the dates will be June 2nd to the 4th.
And we'll be walking in Memphis.
Exactly. I always love that song, actually.
Yeah, it's a great tune. I interviewed Mark Cohen once, many moons ago.
Uh,
Well, cool. That's exciting. Thanks for sharing that. And cool. Well, maybe we'll see you guys in Memphis in June 2025.
no, we'd love
Awesome.
to have you moderate too.
Uh,
What do you think?
we'll talk all things thermal beats.
Nice one, Evan. Thanks so much, mate. You take care.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate your time. Be well, and seriously, it'd be great to see you guys soon.